Hello, I'm Bob Mayer, and welcome to another survival video from me. This one is the most basic of all, explaining to you why you need to prepare. 98% of Americans were not prepared for the recent pandemic, okay? I had preparation for a pandemic covered in the book, which was written 10 years before COVID-19, because it was inevitable that we would have another pandemic, and it's inevitable we'll have another one. Were you prepared for COVID? 1 in 3 Americans have now experienced a climate disaster. Some people debate whether there's climate change, whatever. I just go with the reality of the facts of what's happened. What causes it? That's another issue. But the weather is changing. Climate is changing. Storms are becoming more severe. Events are becoming more severe. Why prepare now? We've had a record-breaking hurricane season, wildfire season. We had record-breaking drought. Then that flipped. That's called climate change. Now California has an excess of water. That doesn't negate the drought before it or the drought that's coming or the next, too much water and landslides, okay? We had a once-in-a-century pandemic. Those will come more often, pandemics, because travel is so much faster and we're encroaching into areas we shouldn't be in. Temperatures are rising. Sea levels are rising. Those are facts. That's the reality. It's not going to be better. It's not going to get any better. So you need to prepare at least to a base level. 80% of Americans live in a county that's been struck by a weather-related disaster since 2007. There's a whole slew of possible disasters. But 60% of Americans have not practiced at all what to do in a disaster. Have you? Only 39% of Americans have an emergency plan. 55% they think they can rely on local authorities to rescue them. I talk about that a bit in the book because a very widespread disaster, you're not going to have anybody from the outside coming in. Do you have a first aid kit? 44% don't. 48% have no emergency supplies. 53% don't have a 3-day supply of food and water, which is the bare minimum. The very first task on my preparation survival guide on page 1 is to get 2 cases of water per person in your household to be prepared. Water is the number 1 priority. Do you have an emergency rally point? Here's a good one. Do you know the phone numbers of immediate family members? We really rely on our cell phones too much. If you don't have your cell phone, can you call people? If you have to borrow someone else's or use a payphone or a landline or tell someone to call, do you know the phone numbers? 98% of people agree that first aid saves lives. I don't know who the 2% are that don't, but 64% of them don't know basic first aid. Do you know how to do CPR? The good news, though, is if you start now, you can do it. Prepare now. That's the whole point of this. Why did I write this book? I mean, I've been through the training. I was in Special Forces. But I was talking to my son, and he has our grandsons out there in San Diego, and I talked to him about earthquake and wildfire preparedness, and I realized they really didn't know how to prepare. I looked at the information that was out there, and it's very confusing, some of these survival guides. I feel like most of them are a little too extreme. They do worst-case scenarios rather than start with the most likely things to happen. I've done a lot of survival training, toward survival, studied the field as my A-team up at above 10,000 feet in the mountains while on deployment. I go for the most likely things to happen. This is a bit more about my background. I taught at the JFK Special Warfare Center in school at Fort Bragg after my time on an A-team and as an operations officer in Special Forces. I also deployed a number of times on active duty special work. I helped design the new Special Forces Assessment and Selection course and the updated qualification course. Yeah, you can start a fire with a battery. I'm looking on Facebook and I see all these ads for fire starters and weird things like that. I'm just like, well, I like having lighter. Maybe that's just me. Yeah, you got to go basic. So let's start basic. I'll show you the flow of the book. It's 2 parts. First half is preparation. The second half is survival. And I do numbered tasks in the preparation part. So preparation, do your area study. I have an entire book on area studies. You'll see it at the end, which is a lot of fun to do. But you tailor your preparation for yourself. You personally, your situation, your family, where you live, what your threats and assets are. And then the 5 key elements of survival: water, food, first aid, shelter, fire. And the places for which you plan: your home, work, and school, and traveling. And then grab-and-go bags. A good grab-and-go bag can solve a lot of your problems. So Area study, I'm not going to talk too much about that. I have a whole presentation on video on the area study. So the flow. First 5 things to do in an emergency. Do you know what to do right away? Key phrase to remember: survival, first aid, basic first aid, water procurement, food procurement, building a shelter and fire, starting a fire, which is not as easy as you think it might be, navigating and tracking, special environments, cold, desert, tropical water, urban environments. I grew up in New York City. Burglary, robbery, carjacking, civil unrest and riots is a big one now. Protests, but not just that, going to concerts or sporting events. Crowd crush is not a stampede. There's a big difference. You don't want to get caught in a crowd crush. Terrorist attack, active shooter, power outages, specific man-made threats. There's a long list of them. I talk about them. Specific natural threats, solar flare and EMP can knock power out on the entire planet, actually, if it got really bad. Our electric grid is very, very fragile. Bugging out and the hide site and caching. Should I stay or should I go? I give you a checklist to figure out what you should do. The bug out hide site. I'm a little different than other people. I'm not as big on, the old bunker thing and hunkering down. I think, a bunker can also be a prison or it's an excellent scavenging site. And that's one thing I do talk about. Very few people talk about scavenging. We're not going to go from civilization to, making bows and arrows. There's a lot of stuff sitting around. So there is an art to scavenging. And then I have all tasks and checklists. I have useful apps, useful websites. And you prepare for 3 reasons, and this is something I thought about for a long time. Yes, to avoid the emergency helps, to have a plan, equipment, and training in place in case of the emergency. But the third one is key. In the back of your head, you're worried about things. You're not prepared. If you prepare, it gives you peace of mind and makes your quality of life better. If you go to my website or use that QR code, click on that red box, it gives you a Word document with links to all the gear I talk about, to free apps you can download that you should download, websites with information. It's on my website at bobmayer.com. These are the books. The one I'm really talking about is the Preparation and Survival Guide in the top center. But the Area Study Workbook, I just finished that last year, and that was a labor of love because there's not a book out there like that, walking you through evaluating yourself, your family, your coworkers, where you live, your threats, your assets, all of that. That's the first thing we did in Special Forces before we deployed. And this is my background and my website. The QR code will take you directly to my website. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay safe out there.